weapons of choice to draft that novel now. Lisa Bubert, Bubert, wrote this. I believe she has some very salient practical points for getting motivated. Lisa says, "You know how I know it's March? Nope, not the sea green in preparation for St. Patty's Day, not the light spring breeze that I could almost pretend is actually there. No, I know it's March because I can feel the collective ooze of self loathing from a community of writers who are feeling their goals of writing that dang novel this year coming to a carpet burny halt. You had grand plans. I know you did. You were going to write that novel this year. This year was going to be your year, and it was chugging along swimmingly. I'm sure. Now you've hit the middle, the muddy, mucky, super swampy, and smelly middle where all grand plans have gone astray, and nothing is what it seems. Here's the good news: you're not alone in this mucky middle phenomenon. Every novelist feels the supreme tug of that in between, the belly weight of the book that drags along the ground. But there are ways to power through. Here are some weapons of choice for your journey to finishing that draft." Now, I like what she's done here because there's really two main processes that would be involved here, two main barriers, I guess you'd say. One is when you start something at a new year. So whether it's a New Year's resolution, sort of a informal goal, or you're just planning to do your novel this year and you get started right away after the holidays. Any sort of resolution or beginning of the year sort of goal tends to hit the biggest brick wall in March. So March is the time when most goals get dropped. Now, it's not just all of a sudden you get to March and you're just tired of it. I guess that could happen. But typically, the reason why your New Year's goals kind of hang up on you in March is because maybe you got a good start in January, maybe you got a couple days behind, maybe you fought to get back up to on track, and you're like, okay, I put a lot of work in and I'm back on track, but now you're tired and you fall behind again and you can't quite get back on track. Then through February, you're falling behind a day here, a day there, and you get to a point where you're so far behind your quota that you're discouraged, and March tends to be the time where people give up from how far they've fallen behind the previous months. The other is something that she hit more directly here, and I think Lisa did a good job with this. When you get to the middle of a novel, sometimes that excitement that got you going on the novel kind of weighs down, and especially if you have a bunch of characters you're taken care of, if you have a complicated plot, if there's a number of subplots, if you're kind of bogging down and you're not quite sure how to get your characters out of certain situations, all these things can combine together to make the middle of a novel very hard to continue on. Thank you for being here, Zach. Most projects are so hard to maintain momentum on past 90 days. That's interesting. Some authors try to finish their projects in less than 90 days. I'm wondering if that may be part of the reason why. I did 3 books for the Maidens of Zombie Kingdom series, and that would have been 2019 that I would have been writing those. And I had really high word counts and just kind of pushed through that whole October, November, December to finish those up. When I got into the new year and before the pandemic, I was trying to keep up those high numbers just because that was what I'd been doing, and I kind of realized that I couldn't get everything else done. So I kept dropping my word counts down, my minimum word counts for the day down to something more manageable. And even now, I'm kind of struggling a little bit with one novel I was on, and I've actually set it aside and picked up another work that I was in the middle of to decide to finish that first and kind of reprioritize some things because I guess I'm getting bogged down in that middle part. But yeah, sometimes it could be just time. You've been working on it for a really long time, or it can just be the spot of the novel you're in. I think combining that with getting to that either 90-day middle of the novel and the problem with resolutions once you hit March, I think all of that together creates a problem. So I think Lisa has done a pretty good job of identifying what the issue is, and now she has a few weapons that you can use against that. All right, weapon of choice: word quotas. Try to hit a daily word quota. Many writers try for 300 to 500 words a day or 1,500 to 2,000 words a week. Yeah, they'll probably be shitty words, but first draft isn't full. But what first draft isn't full of shitty words? Shitty words can be revised, non-existent words cannot. The strength of this particular approach, excellent for eliminating that overwhelming sense of not enough that lurks when drafting. You have done enough, you hit your quota, word, work day done. Weaknesses, some days you will just simply not hit the word quota. Your dog puked, a pipe broke, or a day job called, etc. Or you've hit a snag in the plot and simply do not know what to write next, which requires the next weapon of choice. I've moved away from word counts. Now, I guess technically I do a word quota because I'll just decide how many words I need to hit on whatever projects I'm doing that day. But then I don't keep track of those. So from week to week, month to month, I don't do that because I run into that situation where if I have a couple bad days in a week, then it ruins the whole week. So if I'm just not paying attention to what I wrote each day and just trying to hit those word quotas without tallying them, I think that works for me. 300 to 500 words a day would be kind of low for me, although I've had days that are like that. I've had days that I haven't written anything sometimes. 1,500 to 2,000 is probably a little closer, and then when I was really pushing on a project, I'd do more than that. But I do have a problem where word counts get up in my head. So if I'm tracking word counts too closely, it really does get in the way of my productivity, I think. And some of that's just mental for me and some of the cognitive issues I deal with. So I still have word quotas. That's kind of how I track. But I tend to use other techniques. So I guess technically I am using word quota. Any process you use in some way is a accumulation of words. So whether you're counting them or not, your novel's finished by adding up the words. So there's really not a whole lot of way around that. I would say most authors use this one. This is probably the most common, and it's probably the one where people run into the biggest snags on those days when you don't hit your word counts and you feel like a failure. Which probably isn't the best way to do it, but it's kind of that psychological thing that we all hit into. So the next option is weapon of choice, time clock. Set yourself a timer and clock in, clock out like this is your job, because it is your job. Start small, 30 to 45 minutes. Maybe you'll write, maybe you won't, but once the time is up, you're free. You can clock out. Yes, some days I stare into space for an hour, but a lot of time I write. What else am I going to do? All right, the strength, if you're struggling to stay seated in your chair because you have 34,793,749 other things to do, the time clock is for you. It's pretty good for setting boundaries against those she has marked through coworkers / family members who need to know when you're in office and unavailable. But the biggest strength, in my opinion, Lisa talking here, is the pressure it takes off of production. A half hour spent tinkering on a plot problem is a half hour well spent, even if you did not add any words to your draft. We're writers, so we daydream. As mentioned, I'm perfectly capable of sitting and staring into space for an hour or more. If you notice that you're daydreaming more than working, it may be time to switch weapons. Let's try. And then she moves into another one. I know a number of authors that tend to do a combination. So even the ones I know that do time clock also have minimum word counts. So Armand Rosamelia, Chuck Buda, and several others involved in the Mondo Method podcast will do something called the Mondo Method. And it's not a long stretch like the 45 minutes. They'll do 15-minute sprints and just get as many words done as they can. And I know a number of authors that get their work in by sprint, and a lot of times that's still attached to a word count or word quota. Here she suggests that it could be devoid of word count. So I guess if you don't have a hard deadline that you definitely need to meet, you can just time in however much you're going to write and then time yourself out. And you might do 2 or 3 of those in a day or something like that if you're really trying to get some work done, but that's another option that gets you away from word counts. Next weapon of choice, force of habit. This weapon takes time to master, but once you do, it is the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. Maybe it's that you write as soon as you wake up. Maybe you write after the rest of the house goes to bed. Maybe you catch some words on your lunch break at your day job. Creating a habit of writing has a powerful effect on kickstarting your sludgy brain into action if your brain comes to expect that, okay, at 7 a.m. every morning, this dummy is going to expect me to come up with words, so I better do it. It's almost magic once you get going. Strengths are habits are easy to make and hard to break. Wouldn't it be nice to have a healthy, hard to break habit for once, like meeting your daily word count? Weaknesses, it takes time to create, which means you have to do the work of creating the habit even when you don't want to. The work is made much easier when you have the next weapon on your side. Retrieve your, and she's going to get into that next weapon. I think this is a good one. Most of the more successful authors that I know or have read books from kind of follow this idea. They write at the same time every day. They write in the same place every day. And they tend to follow that habit. Some of them still have word counts. In fact, a lot of them do. And some of the old school guys go with page counts. So even though they're on computers now, they'll still do 2 to 3 pages of work during that force of habit time or during that timed writing. But I do know a number of authors that do that. I don't know that that necessarily means that they are successful because that's the way they do it, or that's just the way they do it and they happen to be successful. I'm not sure. All right, next weapon of choice, writing trigger. This is the item that builds your force of habit. Is it a cup of coffee? Is it reading tarot cards? Is it a certain place you prefer to sit when writing? Okay, I guess I was going into that a little bit when I was discussing the other one. The writing trigger is a bonus pack required to supercharge your force of habit. Once you find it, you'll never look back. The strength, once you identify your trigger, it can be used to jumpstart your force of habit, even at odd times like when you're under the gun for a deadline. Always write with a cup of coffee. Go ahead and make yourself coffee even in the afternoon and sit down to write. Yeah, you probably won't sleep tonight, but the work will be done. All right, Zach, you're saying I sometimes use a writing trigger in the morning. I play an instrumental metal album that is 45 minutes long. I know that I can handwrite a certain number of words in that length of time. That's excellent. So you have, that kind of makes it where you have a place, you have a time, you have a trigger, and like I guess you, like you said, since you know it's 45 minutes, you're kind of giving yourself a timer too. So you got all those things going, and that's a good idea. I've gone back and forth on music. There's a couple ways I've done it. I've just had the radio on like really, really, really low in the background and can kind of write with that. Specifically when there's distractions outside, because my office is kind of on the back corner of my house. And so we're back in the woods, but there's other houses within sight through the trees. And a lot of leaf blowers will be going, or trailers will be driving through, or up on the road closer to, there's a golf course near us, closer to that you'll hear cars going back and forth or some kind of work being done. And so when any of that distraction's going, if it gets to be too much, or sometimes if the house is particularly loud, I'll put on like just ambient noise. So it could just be like waves, and I'll have the headphones on and be playing them off YouTube or something. And sometimes I can do electronic music, but then other times that'll actually distract me. So if I don't need it to block out something else, a lot of times I can't use it. But I think that's a good method because it hits on a lot of these things up here. And of course, you got 45 minutes. One more thing, weaknesses. As with any trigger or habit, it can become controlling. Suddenly you can't write without your coffee, tarot cards, or lucky socks, which is why you absolutely must utilize this final and greatest weapon of all. Weapon of choice, flexibility. Sometimes a word quota will be just the weapon you need. Sometimes you need the time clock, and sometimes you need to create your own weapon to defeat this beast of a book. Flexibility allows you to know yourself as a writer and know what you need when you need it. The strengths, remaining flexible and open to what you need to do your work, allows you to switch your arsenal in and out as needed, mastering all evenly. Grasshopper, you are ready. Weaknesses, none, for real. There is no weakness to being flexible, especially in the weird old world of writing. What are your writing weapons of choice? So Lisa Bubert did a great article here. It's very succinct and direct, and it leaves open for the reader to decide what works for them. I think I'm on the flexible range, and it's not because I'm just so good at everything. That's not what I'm saying. For me, being on the flexible thing is because most things don't work for me forever. So like I did word counts for a while, and they kind of got in the way after a while. I may never go back to specifically word counts, although technically the way she presents word quota, I do that. I just don't count over time. I don't really do the time clock. I guess the closest I come to doing that is when I'm doing a ghostwriting job that's going to take several days. And so when I'm writing someone else's thing, and especially if it's like nonfiction and technical work or self-help book or that kind of thing, where there's just a lot of philosophy and conversation stuff that go into it, a lot of times I'll know this chapter is going to take me more than a day, and I have other things to finish. So I'll say, well, I'll work on this until I get to 2 o'clock, and I'll keep going and just stop at that point to move on to something else. But that's really the closest I come to using that, and I don't do that often with my own work. Force of habit, I guess so. I typically try to write in the morning now, and try to be done in the afternoon, but sometimes it stretches beyond that. And then, of course, I write on stream in the evenings on certain days. But I've changed that on different times too. There's been times in my life where I've written at night. There's been times in my life where I'll try to work a day ahead. So if I sit down at night and start working, I'll work on tomorrow's stuff, and anything I finish is free time that I have, and then I can jump on the next days. And I kind of feel like I'm getting away with something because I'm working ahead. Occasionally, I've used writing triggers and even more things. Just typically, whatever I do to write a novel or short stories or anything else that I'm trying to get done, working full time as an author, I almost always have to evolve and change things because what worked for me in the past, even in past months, may not work for me now. So all of these are really excellent, really excellent, very basic methods for kind of keeping yourself going. Hi there, Jay. Watched a couple of your videos, but this is my first time on. Oh, Darth, thanks for jumping in, man. I'm really trying to encourage more authors to try it out. I don't know that it's for everybody. Most authors are good at podcasts, and a lot of them are either good with video or have gotten a lot better with it with the pandemic going on and having to do a lot of online things. But the idea of going live and doing something with writing live is almost very alien to the concept of writing. So it takes sort of a certain personality of writer to use this platform and do something with it. I've enjoyed it a whole lot. Oh, gifted sub. Thank you so much, Clever. That means a whole lot.